Hello and welcome to the course Logistics and Supply Chains – Fundamentals, Design, Operations. In today's competitive marketplace, companies are under constant pressure to perform in a business environment of reduced capital, slowing growth rates, and increased shareholder demands. Now more than ever, it's important that your organization learns to maximize the power of its working capital by cutting costs and reducing the expenses associated with its supply chain operations. Logistics and supply chain management is a particularly fast-moving field whose ultimate goal is to delight and satisfy the customer. The methods and management strategies your business adopts for everything from procurement of goods to control of inventory will have a profound impact on costs, customer service, and your company's overall profitability. This course will teach you everything you need to know to successfully manage the end-to-end, forward and backward flow of materials and information across your supply chain. Together we will examine the concepts and tactics and applications of various logistics tools and technologies in order to promote a big picture understanding that extends well beyond internal operations. To the end of this course, you will have a thorough understanding of the role played by the logistics and supply chain function, particularly in terms of its key activities and ultimate aim. You will learn how to develop, plan and implement logistics and supply chain strategies that address capacity, external integration, and international trade and operations. You will understand the factors involved in various approaches to facilities location decisions, including costing and scoring models, and you will be able to use tactical methodologies like material requirements planning and just-in-time for capacity planning and supply chain control. You will discover the best ways to improve purchasing, procurement, and transportation functions by learning how to choose suppliers, integrate e-procurement, cost modes of transport, and resolve complications in transportation operations. You will understand the significance of the roles played by warehouse activities, equipment, and layout and operations, and you will know how to manage, calculate, and control inventory costs, economical order quantities, lead times, periodic review systems, and safety and target stock levels. You will discover how to effectively measure and analyze your supply chain performance and operations in order to improve logistics, minimize disruptions, reduce risk, and increase market resiliency. You will understand the best practices for managing returns and achieving social, economic, and environmental responsibility. You will learn all the essential lean tools and techniques you need to improve your business processes, achieve customer delight, and realize operational excellence. During the course, we are going to explore the following topics: overview of logistics and supply chains, logistics strategy, supply chain integration, global logistics, location decisions, managing capacity, planning and controlling the flow of materials, purchasing and procurement, warehouse and inventory management, transportation, measuring performance, supply chain risk management, reverse logistics and sustainability, and quality and continuous improvement. This course is designed for beginners and intermediate students and professionals in logistics, supply chain, and operations management who want to improve and broaden their scope of knowledge on the subject. The course is also designed for more seasoned professionals looking for a quick refresher and test their knowledge and application of logistics and supply chain management. A little bit about our company. We are a leading provider of high-quality courses and programs related to industrial management, health and safety, transportation, supply chain operations, manufacturing, and warehouse management. Our instructors are international-level experts having more than 15 years of practice, master's degrees in their relevant fields. They are certified supply chain professionals, certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belts, and certified in sales and operations planning. The courses we create are structured in a step-by-step manner and contain up-to-date content and comprehensive resources that get our students to the next level. Enjoy the course! Let's start this course with the first lecture, Supply Chain Basics. We're going to give some definitions about supply chain management, and some basic structures. Let's first see this simple infographic that shows the milk supply chain, very simple supply chain. And we go to the store and buy milk or yogurt or any dairy products. But basically, it's a long journey from the dairy cooperative through a factory, distribution centers, retailers, until the end of the chain when we buy to consume the milk. And also, there are two flows here shown: the material flow that goes from the beginning to the end, and information flow that goes both ways. A supply chain is a global network used to deliver products and services from raw materials to end customers through an engineered flow of information, physical distribution, and cash. A supply chain in this view comprises a network of both entities and processes. Supply chain management can be defined as the design, planning, execution, control, and monitoring of supply chain activities with the objective of creating net value, building a competitive infrastructure, leveraging worldwide logistics, synchronizing supply with demand, and measuring performance globally. Here, this picture illustrates a very basic supply chain with three entities: a producer in the middle with one supplier and one customer. These so-called entities that perform the processes can be business or governmental organizations or individuals. They can also be departments or functional areas or individuals within a larger organization. There are internal as well as external supply chains. For the most part, the model applies to corporations. Most work on supply chains involves a manufacturing company in the middle, with a supplier of materials or components on the upstream side and a customer on the downstream side. Technically, a supply chain needs only those three entities to exist. Global supply chains have a lot more. This simplified supply chain can be made up of a couple of organizations: a supplier or provider of goods or services, or a seller with whom the buyer does business. The supplier provides materials, energy, services, or components for use in producing a product or service. These could include items as diverse as sugarcane, fruit, fabric, computer chips, electrical power, or transportation or other services. The next entity is the producer or manufacturer that receives services, materials, supplies, energy, and components to use in creating finished products, such as shirts, airplanes, or guided tours, for example. Customer that receives shipments of finished products to deliver to its customers who wear the shirts, fly the planes, or turn on the lights. There are four basic flows shown in the picture that connect the supply chain entities together. The first is the flow of information back and forth along the supply chain. Also, back and forth within the entities and between the chain and external entities, such as governments, markets, or competitors. The primary product flow
including physical materials and services from suppliers through the intermediate entities that transform them into consumable items for distribution to the final customer. The primary flow of cash from the customer back upstream toward the raw material supplier, and the reverse flow of products returned for repairs, recycling, remanufacturing, or disposal. We call this the reverse supply chain or reverse logistics, which involves different arrangements than the forward logistics that carried materials and products in the other direction. We are going to explore the reverse logistics later in the course. The supply chain concept seems fairly solid when you consider the chain as linked organizations, supplier, producer, and customer, connected by product, information, and payment flows. But the supply chain is more accurately viewed as a set of linked processes that take place in the extraction of materials for transformation into products or services for distribution to customers. Those processes are carried out by the various functional areas within organizations that constitute the supply chain. When considered as a set of processes rather than a succession of companies, the supply chain becomes just a little more difficult to conceptualize. Companies have generally pursued one of two types of supply chain management, called vertical integration or lateral or horizontal integration. Vertical integration or vertical supply chain management refers to the practice of bringing the supply chain inside one organization. An example is a paper company that owns its land and trees, replanting for future harvests, owns the related equipment it uses, and manages all of its product processing, palletizing, and shipping. By bringing many supply chain activities in-house and putting them under corporate management, vertical integration solves the problem of who will design, plan, execute, monitor, and control supply chain activities. A vertically integrated enterprise may grow from an entrepreneurial base by adding departments and layers of management to accommodate expansion, or it may be built through mergers and acquisitions to acquire more supply chain capabilities. The primary benefit of vertical integration is control. A department or wholly owned subsidiary with no independent presence in the marketplace can deal with competitors to sell its components or services at a higher price. Its operations are completely visible to the parent company, in theory, and can be synchronized with other company functions by directives from the top. While the vertical structure still persists in some companies, it is very challenging to be fully integrated end-to-end. Lateral integration or horizontal integration. It's difficult for one corporation to garner the expertise needed to excel in all elements of the supply chain, and it increases their risk, so corporations around the globe have turned instead to outsourcing those aspects of their business in which they judge themselves to be least effective. In this lateral integration, an organization specializes in its competences and relies on other specialists for the rest of the supply chain. Corporate ownership loses control of the outsourced activities and deals separately with members of the chain as suppliers or customers. Each will focus on their core competences such as extraction or production and do business with each other through discrete transactions or long-term contracts. Lateral integration has replaced vertical integration as the favored approach to managing the myriad activities in the supply chain. This horizontal approach is assumed in most supply chain illustrations, including the ones we talked about so far. Lateral chains are now the way of the world and therefore the major focus of supply chain theory and application. Among the reasons for relying on a lateral supply chain, we have the following. To achieve economies of scale and scope, to improve business focus and expertise, and to leverage communication and production competences. Despite the benefits of the lateral supply chain, however, synchronizing the activities of a network of independent companies can be enormously challenging. What each company gains in scale, scope, and focus, it may lose in ability to see and understand the larger supply chain processes. Now let's explore a couple of supply chain examples. The first one will be the manufacturing supply chain model. Here we have the manufacturer in the middle, and we have suppliers, material suppliers, service suppliers, then we have second tier suppliers, and downstream we have distributors and final customers. Depending on the supply chain, depending on the company, there might be more tiers to the left or to the right. We can have the distributor, retail, local supermarket, customer, and then we can have tier 3 or 4 service suppliers, material suppliers. So typically we put manufacturing at the center and suppliers of components to the immediate left. But nowadays the focal company or main company, also called the nucleus firm, which is in the middle, in this case manufacturer, may be actually for example, designer of products and a decision maker who outsources all manufacturing. Alternatively, it may be that component suppliers are the most crucial consideration when designing and managing a supply chain for manufactured products, but utilities and other services are important contributors to the cost of operations too. This example also shows that Tier 1 suppliers have their own suppliers in Tier 2. The wholesale food distributor, for example, that supplies the daily ingredients and raw materials for the menu items, has its material and service suppliers, and they have their suppliers and so forth. For instance, the flour for the crepes is not a raw material but a product with its own supply chain that begins in a farmer's wheat field and is processed in a plant, shipped to a wholesaler and distributed to the corner store. No matter how far you travel toward the left, you will never run out of new tiers of suppliers. Also, here you see that the information flow goes back and forth, while the product flow is from the suppliers to manufacturer, distributor, and customer, and primary cash flow is backwards from customers until the tier N supplier. It might be tier 5 or tier 6. Next example is a service industry supply chain. So the simple definition for a company in the service industry is an organization that provides an intangible product. Utilities, which are suppliers to all manufacturers, are crucial considerations when locating plants and warehouses. If water and electricity or natural gas or both are not available at a proposed site, they cannot be readily made available. Service-oriented supply chains also require sophisticated management. As you can see in the picture, in the simple form, the supply chain of an electric utility, it receives products, services, and suppliers of its own, and then provides its services into 3 distribution channels. In this example, home customers, commercials, and other utilities. These are two different examples, but the general structure of a supply chain needs only three entities, as we talked about in the previous lecture: supplier, producer or service provider, and customer. As we talked in the previous lecture, a single organization sees a supply chain as tiers of suppliers feeding materials from original sources into its operations, and then tiers of customers moving materials out to the final customers. In practice, there are many variations on this basic model. Some supply chains have few tiers of customers and suppliers, while others have many. Some chains have very simple flows of materials, while others have complex and convoluted networks. Different types of products clearly need different structures in their supply chain, and you can imagine that building sand needs a very different type of chain from a mobile phone. Factors that determine the best structure for a supply chain include the following: the product's complexity, number of components, technology, value, bulk, perishability, availability, and profitability. For example, sand has low value, is bulky, and is readily available, so it needs a short, simple supply chain with suppliers as close as possible to final customers. Mobile phones are small, expensive, and are assembled from many components in specialized factories, so they have longer, more complex supply chains. The underlying structure of a supply chain is defined by its length and breadth. Supply chain length is the number of tiers or intermediaries that materials flow through between source and destination. Some supply chains are very short, for example, when a producer sells directly to final customers, and other supply chains are very long, perhaps with intermediaries connecting several stages of manufacturing and distribution through a series of logistics centers, transportation operators, agents, freight forwarders, brokers, and so on. Supply chain breadth is the number of parallel routes that materials flow through, or the number of organizations in each tier. On top of these basic structures are a series of related features that include the types of organizations in the chain, the activities that each does, the size of facilities, their locations, capacity, relationships between them, and so on. Together, they describe the overall structure of a supply chain. The best shape for a supply chain depends on individual circumstances. It mostly depends on the type of product, but also the logistic strategy. For instance, a company that focuses on fast service will use a chain with facilities close to final customers, so that it can make quick deliveries. A company that focuses on low cost will centralize all operations in a few large facilities that give economies of scale. Three particularly important factors are the amount of control that an organization wants over its logistics, the quality of service offered, and the cost. A manufacturer delivering directly to customers has a short, narrow supply chain like this one. This gives a lot of control over logistics, but it may be difficult to achieve either high customer service or low cost. Broadening the chain gives higher customer service, but it increases costs and reduces the manufacturer's control. Making the supply chain long and narrow, like this one, uses the expertise of intermediaries to reduce costs. But the manufacturer loses control and the customer service does not improve. Making the supply chain both long and broad removes most control from the manufacturer, but customers get good service. The shape of the distribution part of a supply chain is particularly important to manufacturers, and here we can list some commonly used patterns. Here we have direct shipping from manufacturer to customers, probably from warehouse at the manufacturing site. Shipping to a consolidation point for sorting, packing, finishing before delivering to customers. Shipping from manufacturers directly to retailers where customers pick up the product. Shipping through wholesalers and retailers for customers. Shipping through the manufacturer's branches, perhaps with some finishing, and then retailers to customers. And shipping through the manufacturer branches and then wholesalers, retailers to customers. There are many variations on each of these patterns, including having retailers delivering products to customers with options 3 to 6, including other agents at various points involving other manufacturers or industrial users in the chain, having more consolidation points and using more levels of warehousing and storage. Each of these models comes with a variety of different options for ownership and control. Now let's continue with the basics of logistics. Every organization has to move materials. Manufacturers have factories that collect the raw materials from suppliers and deliver finished goods to customers. Retail shops have deliveries from wholesalers. A TV news service collects reports from around the world and delivers them to viewers. Logistics is the function responsible for all aspects of the movement and storage of materials on their journey from original suppliers to the final customers. Every organization delivers products to its customers. Traditionally, these products are described as either goods or services. We have manufacturers like Sony that make tangible goods, while the Vodafone provide intangible services. But this view is misleading, and it is more realistic to describe every product as a complex package that contains a mixture of both goods and service. For instance, Toyota manufactures cars, but they also give services through warranties, after-sales guarantees, repairs, and finance packages. McDonald's or KFC provides a combination of goods, burgers, chicken wings, packaging, etc., and services when they prepare food, sell it, and clean the restaurant. Then we can describe a product package as lying on the spectrum shown here. At one end are the products that are mostly goods, such as cars, car producers, house builders, book publisher, and at the other end are products that are mostly services, such as health service, holiday education, insurance, phone services, etc. In the middle, we have the products with a more even balance, such as fast food restaurants, hospitals here, also websites, and so on. At the heart of an organization are the operations that create and deliver the products. These operations take a variety of inputs and convert them into desired outputs, as shown here. The inputs include raw materials, components, people, equipment, information, and some other resources. Operations are producing, manufacturing, serving, transportation, selling, and the main outputs are goods and services. For instance, any restaurant takes inputs of food, chef's kitchen, waiters, and dining area, Its operations include food preparation, cooking and serving, and the main outputs are meals, services, customer satisfaction, etc. Logistics manages the flow of inputs from suppliers, the movement of materials through different operations within the organization, and the flow of materials out to the customers. Moving materials into the organization from suppliers is called inbound or inward logistics. Moving materials out to customers is called outbound or outward logistics. Moving materials within an organization, often described as collecting from internal suppliers and delivering to internal customers, is materials management. We're going to move on to the goals of logistics. We said that logistics is responsible for the flow of materials through a supply chain, so it is also described as supply chain management. Many experts argue that logistics is somewhat narrower and concentrates on the movements within a single organization, while supply chain management takes a broader view of the whole chain. So most logistics, supply chain operations management professional organizations and experts gives the following definitions. Logistics, the task of coordinating material flow and information flow across the supply chain. Supply chain, a global network used to deliver products and services from raw materials to final customers through a flow of information, physical distribution and cash. And supply chain management, designing, planning, execution, control and monitoring of all those supply chain activities with the ultimate objectives of creating net value, building a competitive infrastructure, leveraging global logistics, synchronizing supply with demand, and measuring performance. These definitions are broad and can include virtually everything that an organization does. For example, a car assembly plant where each car passes along a series of operations. In general, each time a car moves one step along the production line, it can be described in terms of logistics, moving materials, but it is usually considered in terms of production or operations management. This points to a basic interaction between logistics, moving materials to the point where they are needed, and operations management, working on the products. There can be no clear boundaries or limits between these two functions, and there is no point in drawing artificial boundaries around the activities to be included in each. Supply chain exists to overcome gaps between suppliers and customers. They permit operations that are best done in locations that are some distance away from customers or suppliers. In general, supply chains exist to overcome any kind of gap between customers and suppliers. Here we are going to give a short list of gaps. The first, space gaps with suppliers physically separate from customers. For instance, bauxite is mined in Australia, but it is used by distant manufacturers. Time gaps, when there is a difference between the time a product becomes available and the time when customers want to buy it. For instance, whiskey is distilled in Scotland and then stored for at least 3, 5, sometimes more years while it matures. Quantity gap, this is the mismatch between the amounts available from suppliers and the demand from customers. For instance, publishing and printing books in large batches to reduce operating costs. But usually, each customer buys a single copy. Variety gaps, when customers want a wider variety of products than is available from a single supplier. And information gaps, when customers do not know about the availability or source of products and suppliers do not know about potential customers. Let's talk a little bit about customer service, which is also a goal of logistics. An organization usually states its overriding goals and objectives in a corporate strategy, and this typically refers to profitability, return on investment, return on assets, share value, sales, customers, and so on. The key point is that every organization achieves its aims by supplying products to customers, and its success ultimately depends on achieving customer satisfaction. If an organization does not satisfy its customers, it will not survive for a long time. This gives the context for logistics and allows us to phrase the overriding aim of logistics in terms of providing customer service. Managers should organize logistics in the best way possible to achieve customer satisfaction. We have to be careful, as any organization can give outstanding customer service if it allocates enough resources. But resources cost money, and higher customer service almost inevitably comes at a higher price. The problem is that customers will only pay a certain amount for a product or service, so a more realistic goal for logistics is to find the best balance between service and cost. It might aim at providing a specific level of customer service for the lowest cost, or alternatively maximizing the service that is given for a specific cost. People often summarize the goals of logistics as getting the right materials in the right quantity at the right place at the right time from the right source with the right quality and price. Now, one can argue with this, but of course it depends on what we mean by right. This is defined by customers who in different situations can demand very different things. For example, when you mail a letter, you sometimes want it delivered quickly, in which case the right delivery is the quickest one. Sometimes you want it delivered as cheaply as possible or with high security at a specified time, with a receipt to a specified person and so forth. Logistics must deal with these varying demands with the essential point that it must give a service that customers are prepared to pay for. This is usually phrased in terms of logistics adding value, which means that its costs are less than the perceived benefits that it brings. We're going to talk more about customer service later in the course, and also costs and value benefits of logistics. Logistics is an essential function in every organization. Without logistics, no materials move, no operations can be done, nothing is made, products are not delivered, and customers are not served. In this picture here, we suggest the role of logistics as an essential part of every trade. Customers generate demand for products, which operations create using necessary resources, and logistics move everything around this loop. Not only logistics is essential, but it is also expensive. Unfortunately, it is very hard to say exactly how expensive, because normal accounting does not separate logistic costs from other operating expenditures, and there is always disagreement about the activities to be included. As a result, very few companies can put precise figures on their logistics costs, and many have almost no idea of the amounts involved. As an expensive function, logistics has a clear impact on an organization's financial performance. You can see the financial importance of logistics from a company's return on assets which is defined as the pre-tax profit divided by the value of assets employed. This gives a measure of how well an organization's resources are used, and higher values usually suggest better performance. We can expand the basic equation to look at the effects of logistics on a return on assets as units sold multiplied by selling price and profit margin divided by current assets plus fixed assets. And here also in this picture we can summarize this influence. Just quickly to explain some of the terminology used here. Current assets. More efficient logistics reduces the current assets primarily through lower inventory levels, then lower investment in stock and free up cash for more productive purposes and reduce the need for borrowing. Fixed assets, warehouses, transport fleets, materials, handling equipment and other facilities mean that logistics is a heavy user of fixed assets. Using them more efficiently can bring considerable savings for the company. And sales, by supplying a more attractive product or delivering them efficiently to improve customer service, logistics can increase sales and give higher market share. Profit margin, more efficient logistics reduce operating costs and directly increase profit margins. And price, logistics can improve the perceived value of products or services, perhaps making them more readily available, enabling faster delivery or shortened lead times. This increased value can allow the company to charge premium prices. Good logistics can reduce assets and increase profits, both of which lead to a higher return on assets. And now we are going to see a practical example to show this relationship and effects on financial performance. So we have a ABC company that has sales of 10 million a year. Its inventories amount to 25% of sales. Annual holding costs of 20% of the inventory value held. Operation costs without the inventory costs are 7.5 million per year, and other assets are estimated at 20 million. So we are going to looking for the current return on assets as a current position for the company, and then we'll calculate how this change of inventory levels, how the inventory levels will be changed if we reduce them to 20% of sales, and the effect on the return on assets. So for the current position, we have the inventory costs, which is the amount of inventory multiplied by holding costs, which gives us 0.5 million per year. Total costs, we have 8 million, and profit, sales minus total cost, 2 million a year. And then the total assets, which is 22.5 million. And now using the formula, profit divided by total assets leads to a return on assets 8.9%. So now let's reduce the inventory by 20% of sales. In this current position, they are 25. So we will have inventory costs 0.4, which is less per year. Then total costs 7.9, profit 2.1 million, and total assets 22. And then the return on assets is 9.5%, which is higher, and we see that reducing stocks by 20% gives lower operating costs, higher profit and an increase in return on assets. Let's finish the lecture with a quick summary of the role and importance of logistics. First, it is essential because all companies, even service industry companies, rely on the movement of materials. It has strategic importance with decisions affecting long-term performance. Expensive, with costs often forming a large part of turnover of a company. Has effects on most operations within an organization and supply chain. Directly affects profits, lead time, reliability, and some other measures of company's performance. Forms links with upstream suppliers and also with downstream customers, contributing in this way to customer satisfaction and added value, and in terms of suppliers, developing beneficial long-term relationships with them. Determines the best locations and sizes of facilities. Is risky, with widespread safety, health, economic and environmental issues, and can foster growth of other organizations such as suppliers and intermediaries offering specialized services.